you must ultimately seek the opinion of the people. Because people are central to this decision, not the Union of India.
In a constitutional democracy, seeking the opinion of the people has to be through established institutions.
Agree?
Right? So long as a democracy exists, as it does in terms of a constitutional democracy,
Yeah.
any recourse to the will of the people has to be expressed and sought in terms of established institutions.
I agree. So
There's no
either
question.
you do it,
So
either you do it.
you cannot envisage, therefore, a situation like a Brexit type referendum.
Yeah.
That's a political decision which was taken by the then government.
Yeah.
Formulate, now that we've seen the speeches, we'd like to formulate the principle which
The principle is, Malas, that an executive act of the Union of India cannot alter unilaterally provisions of the Constitution of India as applicable to the state of Jammu and Kashmir. That's the central.
Cannot alter unilaterally.
Yes.
The provisions of the Constitution
of India as applicable to the Jammu and Kashmir. Including getting rid of the special status given, acceded to by the Union, by the Government of India, and by Parliament in enacting 370 of the Constitution. That's the submission.
Say it's an executive act.
I'll say 356 is executive, 367 definition is executive. These are all executive acts. Parliament came into the picture when the changes had already been done through executive acts. We're challenging that.
As you argued, the process was wrong.
Yes.
Whatever was done.
Yes.
That is, the Parliament did it.
No, Parliament accorded approval to the executive acts which unilaterally changed the Constitution as it was applicable to the state of Jammu and Kashmir. That's the central question that your lordships will have to decide. Could Parliament have, could the Union of India have done it?
So is it your case that the Parliament could have done it?
No, not at all. Mullahs, that also I will answer. Mullahs, kindly see, ultimately this was a political decision taken in the context of the situation then prevailing. Right? And the complete abrogation of Article 370 must also be a political decision. Whereas your lordships will remember Brexit, what happened? In Brexit, what happened? There was no constitutional provision seeking a referendum. But when you want to sever a relationship which has been entered into, you must ultimately seek the opinion of the people. Because people are central to this decision, not the Union of India. It goes counter to the very grain of Article 370.
Mr. Vibal, in a constitutional democracy, seeking the opinion of the people has to be through established institutions.
Agree?
Right? So long as a democracy exists, as it does in terms of a constitutional democracy,
Yeah.
any recourse to the will of the people has to be expressed and sought in terms of established institutions.
I agree. So
There's no
either
question.
you do it,
So
either
you
you do it.
You cannot envisage, therefore, a situation like a Brexit type referendum.
Yeah.
That's a political decision which was taken by the then government.
Yes.
But within a constitution like ours, there's no question of a referendum.
But this is a political decision that they have taken by unilaterally through an executive order, changing definitions. This is not some constitutional decision. That's what your lordships. Supposing your lordships were to say that they can change the definition, or your lordships were to say.
But therefore, the ultimate question is whether the constitution does or does not interest that authority.
That's correct. That's all that I'm asking, brother. I'm not asking for anything more.
And which in turn depends on whether 370 is construed as you say, a permanent feature, irrespective of the terminology used, because that is in the context of the changes till the Constituent Assembly was there, or is it something which is capable of being?
Well, let me that's a much higher level, Malas, to which I'm not, in fact, arguing that today. Malas, whether it is permanent or it is temporary, let's forget about it. The central question is, can the Union of India, in this manner, terminate that relationship that is constitutionally recognized in Article 370?
We understand.
It may not be permanent. It may be permanent. It may not be. You may change it. You may. You may
I
have.
said in the context that that was the argument earlier. So we have come to the next argument, which is the manner in which it is done.
That's right.
Is flawed accordingly.
It's absolute. It's a fraud on the Constitution itself, according to me. It is politically motivated. It is a political act. These executive orders are political acts. They are not constitutional acts. That's my submission. And whether it is a permanent feature or a temporary feature is really at the moment not an issue. The reason why it's not an issue is maybe there is a constitutional way of doing this. I'm not addressing that. Nor have they resorted to that constitutional methodology. If they resort to it, it will be tested in a court.
And on the process, you said last time that, first, the Section 92 power was vested in the governor,
Yes.
independent of the Council of Ministers. Step
36,
2,
38,
right. Now,
and
Step
92.
2, right. Step 2, the Legislative Assembly is dissolved by the governor under Section 53 without aid and advice.
Yes.
3, the proclamation is issued under Article 356.
Yeah.
You said that the object of the proclamation under 356 to eventually restore democracy.
That's right.
And not the decimation of democracy.
Right.
And then finally, we saw the amendment of Article 3 in the presidential notification.
That's right. That's
So
also an executive act.
all these 4 steps, according to you, were constitutionally flawed. There was no provision for these 4 steps because you've essentially taken away the powers of the State Assembly and exercised them under the garb of 356. That's the submission.
That's right. Absolutely. I'm deeply obliged to your lordship. But I just want to read one other.
Only one last thing which I wanted to ask you. You made your point on the process which was followed. They will have to answer it. On the proviso to clause 3 of 370, is there something ultimately that happened in the Constituent Assembly which sheds light on which way the Constituent Assembly was inclined to go?
Yes.
Because we are reading individual speeches. What happens thereafter at the end of this process
Well,
in
the
1957?
Constitution was adopted in 1957
Yes.
by the legislature of Jammu and Kashmir. Between 1951 and 1957, they could have determined or terminated the essence of Article 370, abrogated it themselves and said, there's no need for this constitution. We want to be a state, the part of India, like any other state. That is why 370 sub-article 3 referred to the decision of the Constituent Assembly. That decision could have been taken. But my lord asked me the question, well, now that there is no Constituent Assembly, how will this happen? If it were deemed to be a temporary provision. That's what my lord put to me. Right?
So your argument would be really, I mean, if I can put it that way, that the proceedings in the Constituent Assembly of the state of Jammu and Kashmir would indicate a reaffirmation of the arrangement under Article 370 as a long-term arrangement.
That's right.
So that the 3 options that Sheikh Abdullah spoke about, namely either of joining Pakistan,
Yes.
acceding to India, or remaining independent, they gave up the first and the third option.
That's correct.
They decide that the ultimate decision was to stay within the dominion of India, but subject to the safeguards of 370.
That's right.
And therefore, according to you, 370 assumes a permanent character, irrespective of the nature of the provision which is envisaged in the Indian Constitution.
And that's what Sheikh Abdullah said in his speech, that look, this relationship.
That still begs one question as to whether it was enough that the Jammu and Kashmir Constituent Assembly proceeded on that basis. Could 370, which was envisaged to be a temporary provision, be converted into a permanent provision merely by the proceedings of the J&K Assembly? Or was there some further act required from the Indian Constitution, either in the form of a constitutional amendment, by virtue of which 370 would cease to have a temporary character but have a permanent character, in implementation of the wishes of the Jammu and Kashmir Constituent Assembly.
Whereas government of India never expressed a contrary opinion throughout.
But didn't it have to take place through a process of amending the Indian Constitution itself?
No.
To
for
convert the
reason-
character of
Well,
370.
all right, well, now your lordships are again going back on the issue of temporary nature. That temporary nature is not part of the Article 370. It's not part of it. It's not a part of 370, Madam. In fact, Muzaffar Beg says we didn't even know about it.